Welcome to a brand new episode of the Spiraling Podcast. I am your host, Jackson Wallace. I got my friend, my buddy, my pal, Evan Underwood filling in for us. Evan, how are you doing, man?
Doing pretty good, man. It's a beautiful day outside. No complaints. We're close to the weekend.
That's right.
It's all good.
We're feeling good, man. Tomorrow's Friday, right? So we're out to a good start. We got a couple podcasts for y'all this week recording. But anyway, let's get to our very special guest. We have Thomas Wurm. He's a Wildland firefighter and master practitioner in NLP hypnosis and mental emotional release. He is the founder of mountainmindtricks.com and our next guest on the show. Thomas, how are you doing, man?
Oh, man, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here and doing awesome. Yeah, it's dumping snow here, so getting my split board ready. Let's probably go tomorrow.
Really? What part of the country are you at, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm in Wyoming in Jackson Hole.
Wyoming? So. Dude, my best friend's in Wyoming. He's up in Moorcroft. And it's like a small, I guess it's close to what's that big town he called me? Called Gillette?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he's about 30 minutes from Gillette, about 30 minutes north.
Okay.
And, he messes with me all the time because he was a lifelong Texas guy. Like, he was born and raised here. That's where I'm at right now, and Evan is too. And we poke fun at each other all the time. He would tell me they're getting snow in May last year, and I'm like, dude, okay, if you guys have ever seen Game of Thrones, I make fun of him all the time. I'm like, dude, you're living up by the wall with the wildlands over there, man. Like, that's the real
absolutely.
North. That's the cold.
Absolutely. Yep. There's about 6 feet of snow on the ground right now, it seems like. Oh, my God.
That's actually insane.
Wow.
So you do, you say you brought your snowboard? Like, is that the thing that you do?
Split boarding.
Okay.
Yeah, split boarding. So it's like a snowboard, but it splits in half, like into skis, and then you hike up mountains and put it all back together to snowboard down. So,
dude, that's awesome. So you're one of those like crazy athletes out there. Like that takes a lot of like physical stamina and skill and endurance, right? You know, to hike up those mountains.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's great, man. That's great. Well, again, super glad to have you here on the show. Welcome to the Spiraling Podcast. I mean, we talk about anything and everything, man. We go to, yesterday we had a guest and she was a child rape survivor. And so we talked about her story. We've talked about mental health and sex addiction and anything and everything. So we just want our guests to feel comfortable to come in and tell their story. But Thomas, maybe tell us and the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, I started basically wildland firefighting when I was 18 and had some really troubling teenage years. So right after high school, I went right to work just to kind of figure life out, and wildland fire turned into this big career I had for 14 years, a long time. Traveled around the country on all sorts of federal crews, on engines, helicopters, master the chainsaw. I mean, just was out there in the field in the wilderness for weeks, months at a time. And the biggest thing that I found with all of that was I loved my job so much. I loved being out there in the woods. I loved seeing fire on the ground, like this wrath of God out in the wilderness, just like wiping the slate clean. It's so powerful to be out there like that. And I think what's so interesting is all of the lessons I learned through all that, not just physical or leadership lessons, but spiritual lessons. And also, a lot of the, trauma I went through as a firefighter. I mean, you go through crazy stuff out there in the field, right? Like trees almost dropping on people, like helicopters crashing, all that stuff is always going on. So eventually it drove me into mental health. And now I have a practice where I'm doing alternative mental health with other wildland firefighters and helping them overcome their own trauma, after my own, I would say mental health, spiritual crisis that I had starting in 2015. And that was, I would say 2015 to 2018, early 19 was just really hard time for me. I went through a lot of really crazy mental health, physical health stuff. And now I'm on the other side and helping other people. So I'm just excited about life.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Wow. That's rough, man. But I can tell that you really have a passion for what you do. You talked about the wrath of God, just kind of wiping the slate clean. And maybe Evan, you could chime in here. And Evan, and forgive me, I know we've talked about this before, but you're kind of dipping your toe into the firefighting realm too, right? Fire investigation, maybe.
Yeah, so I've been a volunteer firefighter since I was 17. So way back to like 2002.
Wow.
Did a lot more structural stuff. I'm trained in Wildland, but never really did much of it. But yeah, I'm actually working on my degree for fire and arson investigation right now.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
Man. But
that is so interesting.
I was always curious what goes into the training, Thomas, of someone that's going to be out there in the wildland firefighter realm. Maybe you guys can educate me a little bit.
Yeah, so the basic stuff is really like learning how to read weather, not like from a forecast, being able to read the clouds, read the wind, like really get in touch with the weather. And then the other one is just really basic understanding of fire behavior and like how fire runs faster uphill, what kind of conditions it burns hotter in. So you can kind of like understand where the fire is going to go. You can kind of predict a little bit in that basic kind of course. And then you have a physical test of, you have to walk with 45 pounds for 3 miles under 45 minutes. That's like the basic test for all wildland fire. And then that's kind of it. You have a basic class in like incident command systems, but that's really it. So when you're just starting out, it's really basic information. It's about a week class, and then you're out there, man. You're out there, and for me, I went all the way up to like crew boss level, engine boss, and incident commander 4. So,
Wow.
I probably have, gosh, I don't know, 10 or 15, even 20 classes that are, maybe 2 or 3 days each. So it's almost like a 2-year degree, I would say, at that level. It's getting close anyway.
Wow, that's very impressive. There's just no way I could be doing any of that. So thank you both, seriously, for helping out in the community and doing what you guys do. I mean, the wildfires lately, it seems like every year in California is just raging. So thank y'all for what you do. Seriously, that's it. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Absolutely. But so you're going through that training, and you have extensive years of experience. So I was wondering, maybe you could tell us. I was going through your website a little bit. I like to try and do a little bit of my homework before our guest comes up. And thank you for having a website, by the way. It just makes it 10 million times easier to kind of prepare a little bit for a podcast. It's like, oh, okay, this guy does this. But in there, you mention about being in the fire, being there, and literally they throw you into the fire. So you mentioned a moment where you're surrounded by wildfires, and there's a moment you described it in a paragraph in your website of where you were consumed by fear. So you had moments where you were consumed by fear, then you had moments of complete mental clarity. Can you maybe describe a specific moment in where you were consumed by fear?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, gosh, it's so interesting because that wildland fire environment, it's chaos. It's like walking into a storm or a hurricane. It's so unpredictable. And so I would say the fear came in for me like after, this traumatic event of my engine captain passing away. So the fear really started to come in after that, like my 10th season, I would say it kind of started trickling in. And I would say, I think one of the really, it's hard to say like fear, like, the biggest one is flying in helicopters for me. That was like one, I was like, okay, I'm going to Helitac crew because I'm scared of it. That's like my attitude. Like if I'm fearful, I'm going to go do it. So flying in a helicopter, like around a fire was just always like, my heart's going to just pump out of my chest, and then you get on the ground, you're in that fire environment. It's like, okay, chaos. I know this, but I think specifically there is this one time where we were on this fire in Eastern Idaho and one of the craziest fires I've ever been on. When we showed up, basically there was like 9 to 15 little lightning fires that started kind of on this big sagebrush plateau, kind of near Idaho Falls. And so we started some of them are growing together, and it's probably like 100 acres by the time we showed up in an engine. And so they jumped it with some jumpers. They got some people on there, but it's really just kind of cranking around. Like nobody had any control. And I think one of the biggest things that we had to do, like first off, was burn off around this old Indian burial site. And it was just like, oh shit, that is spooky. Yeah. We don't want to do that. We have and the locals were like, well, that's like the old chief's burial site. Like really, you guys shouldn't be doing that. And it was just like, well, we want to save it. Right. So we did put some fire around this old burial site. And after that, the fire, every time we get close to like cutting it off or like putting it out or putting line around it with fire, it would just blow out every line and go like another 1,000 acres, 10,000 acres. It just blew up. And it was like every single time we would lose it. And this one time we had like basically we had this last corner to cut off with fire. We were burning to put more fire, to put the fire out. I know that sounds weird, but fighting fire with fire. Yeah. And so there's this one corner, we're like getting ready to like put some fire down. And there's this like 30-foot flame front coming at us. And it's just like, okay, this is normal. Like we've done this a million times. And as soon as the guy next to me put down like a pinch of fire on the ground, like 2 seconds of fire, basically we had a dust devil. If you've ever seen that, it came onto the line, took that fire into the dust devil and blew it across our line. And then there was like 2 dust devils like blowing with fire like down both sides of the line and just fire everywhere. Like we had to jump into our trucks with our packs on, with basically all of our gear, with the drip torches, like everything, because I mean we ended up melting decals. And like I just remember like having my hand like on my ear because it was so hot inside the cab of the truck, like, and we barely made it. And that was like, that happened over and over on that one fire. And I was gripped by fear in that moment for sure. I remember asking the captain at the time, like, hey, do we need to like get our shelters up? Cause this is bad, you know? And I think that was the worst one really, but yeah.
Wow. That's I don't even know what I would do in that situation. Talk about dust devils kicking up fire. That's crazy. So maybe explain a little bit, because I've seen what you're talking about, burning a piece of land, you know, to stop a fire. That sounds kind of counterproductive, but it's not. Could you maybe explain to some of our listeners who are kind of confused by that?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, if we can get a dozer or a road is like awesome, you know, road or dozer line like out in front of the fire. And as long as it's anchored, which meaning it's like there's no way the fire can hook around it, right? It's like anchored into a rock. It starts from a rock and ends at a rock, or starts in a road and ends to a road. So that line is like secured. And if there's fire coming at you, you can go out ahead a little bit and put fire down, and basically you have one wave of fire hitting the other wave of fire, and it just cancels itself out. So there's no fuel to burn. Gotcha. So that's one way. There's also, maybe we have line that's like miles and miles away. And then we'll actually burn that off to make our line, instead of like 50 feet wide, we'll make it like 100 feet or 500 feet wide with black. So sometimes we use black line in that sense, but the canceling out works really well.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems like I remember first seeing that somewhere on, I can't remember, I saw a YouTube video or something about it, and it sounded so fascinating to me, because I was like, wow, that just when you think about it, it's brilliant, but it looks so weird whenever you see that, like you said, with the drip torches and stuff out in front and making that line. That's so cool. So man, we talked about that moment you were conserved by fear. What about that moment where you had just perfect, complete mental clarity that you mentioned on your website?
Oh man, there's I would say, oh shoot, gosh, there's a couple of them. I think for me it's like having I can't remember what is on the website actually, because there's so many moments like that. Right. There's so many moments of good and like clarity and fear, right, in that dynamic situation. But I think the biggest one, if I look back, is probably I remember this one fire in Arizona. We were at like the Arizona Strip, so down by like St. George, Utah. Okay. And you know, it's like 110 degrees out when we get dispatched for the fire in this helicopter, and it's this big plateau, like kind of like a big mesa. If you've been down in Arizona country, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so this fire is just kind of running around in grass on top of this mesa, and we, you know, get dropped off by the helicopter, probably, you know, 500 feet from the fire. You know, pretty standard operations. Get all of our gear out, helicopter flies away, and basically we had to grab, like, as soon as we got out, and then helicopter flies away, it's like all of our gear is there, like, you know, 100 pounds of gear each, me and this other person. And so we grab our gear and start walking towards the black, because that's where we're going to be safe. And it's just like it's just started running all over. And basically by the time we got to the black, like where we landed the helicopter was like 100-foot flames already. So thankfully we got in the black like immediately. But I remember just standing there in the black, just like taking a nice deep breath, like we're 100% safe, just watching this like like crown fire through the grass, just this grass ripping like 100-foot flames just everywhere around us, being like, just you could just breathe and be calm and just like, yeah, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? Like that feeling is so clear and calm, and just knowing that you're safe. Like it was amazing.
Very cool. And Evan, just to touch on you for a second, like if for everyone, this is you're speaking your language. So if you ever have any questions or you want to jump on in, tell me to move over here to the side. We had some of that stuff over the yesterday with our other podcast, but I just didn't want you to feel like you couldn't talk or anything. So
no, I'm enjoying listening to his stories and the passion and stuff that's there. It's pretty awesome.
Same, man. Same. All right, brother. So okay. So let's go back to. I want to take you back to whenever you're giving your introduction. You talked about a moment, several years, where you were kind of going through a bit of a rough time. And if you don't feel comfortable talking about the details of that, then just tell me shut up. I'm fine with that. But do you feel open enough to maybe talk about that in a little bit greater detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'd say it started with, one of my best friends, my supervisor, my engine captain, passed away really suddenly from a heart attack. And it was like, it was one of those things where I got the call. It was like, that can't be real. But when I did like truly like listen to what the person was saying and telling me that this has happened, I collapsed, man. It was like getting kicked in the gut. I can't even explain what it felt like, but it felt like life-ending event, right? It was very traumatic for me. And, I never saw him, or it was never like a big traumatic event. It was more like this first dealing with death, like really close with me. And I've, been around death on fires and stuff, like on the other side of the fire, things like that. But this was like my best friend, right? And that was sad and really hard. And I would say like that was a hard time by itself. But then I would say within a year, I started having really bad anxiety, really crazy stuff going on physically. And this anxiety and fear like was just overwhelming to the point I was starting to lose function, like at work, in my daily life, like relationships and all that stuff. So it was really tough on me, like this overwhelming sense of doom, basically. And this drove me into like meditation and yoga and really going deeper into myself. And what's interesting is that I have this pattern. I have done this before, right? I did this before when I was a teenager, and we can talk about that more. Yeah. But basically I went really deep into meditation. I went like too deep. Like I had a, what I'd call like a Kundalini experience, like a awakening kind of transcendental moment during meditation that was absolutely life-blowing. And like you said, we can talk about anything. Like I've done psychedelics before, but this was totally sober and the same experience. So it was very powerful. That was, I would say, the catalyst for like kind of my healing journey, but it also like really screwed me up for like my health symptoms, my anxiety, everything got like 100 times worse after that. Wow. And so I finally found an acupuncturist that really helped me, like really helped manage my energy, get my energy out of my head and back down to like a normal place, help manage my energy, manage my anxiety. And through that healing journey, he introduced me to NLP and was like, you need to go check this out. So I went to my first NLP class. And after that, it was just like, whoa, I have to do this. Like, this is like, I was sitting there in classes like NLP for firefighters. I have to do this. This is like one of those moments of like, God was speaking to me. Like, I'm not very religious, I would say, but in a very spiritual way. Like this voice was like, you're doing NLP for firefighters.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. What's NLP again?
So neuro-linguistic programming. And that sounds like, whoa, that's a crazy word, right? But really it's like your neurology, our language, and kind of like, if you think of your smartphone, like, and has apps, all these apps, like we get all these apps installed when we're younger, like 0 to 7 years old. And we just carry around these apps that are outdated from 0 to 7 years old, even when we're 45 or 30 or 25, like we still have these programs running. So that's really what NLP works on, is like, let's reprogram and update those apps so we're healthy,
Very cool. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious of what NLP meant. So
yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And So I would say, gosh, that healing journey was rough. I mean, I was in a really rough spot, and I think that the meditation, the yoga, the journaling, all those things really helped me. And the acupuncturist that I would say the acupuncturist really went from, there was a lot of Chinese medicine and acupuncture, of course, but he's also a shamanic practitioner, the Lakota tradition. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of visionary work, a lot of shamanic work to really get myself back inside my body after that like spiritual event, basically. So there's a lot of spiritual cleanup to do. And so, now I'm a master practitioner in NLP and hypnosis and mental emotional release. And so that's what I do full time. My practice now is, I have a podcast, I write books, and I also, full time doing, helping wildland firefighters with their traumas and their healing journeys. And the mental emotional release is really interesting because it's timeline therapy is another way to it's been talked about, but really you go back to the very first event of like your anger, the first time you're angry. And sometimes that's, when you're 3 years old or in the womb or during your birth or even past life stuff. So it's really interesting what comes up. And when we release that, people's lives are completely changed. And
Wow.
And it's very powerful. And that's what helped me so much was my own breakthrough session. Is the process, is what we call it in NLP. And the breakthrough session for me was just it was so big that it was kind of like an aha moment, right?
Yeah, it's very cool getting those aha moments in life. Well, I'm glad that you were able to get that help, and they were able to help you out. And congratulations on doing all this full time now. That's got to be it's got to be a little bit different than being out there on the in the fires every single day. I am curious though. You spoke earlier. You were in a wildfire fire up in Idaho and then one down in Arizona. And again, please forgive my ignorance. Were you part of like a traveling fire group, or were you just part of like different departments over the course of your career? Or I was just curious because you were in a couple different places in the country.
Yeah. So basically, I worked for the Forest Service and for multiple duty stations. So I worked in different areas and I kind of traveled around with my stations. But generally, the way it works is when you're federal, it's
Gotcha.
basically when there's big fires going on and you're available, it's like you put your name out there on a list, and if you get picked up, you go. So, I've pretty much fought fire in every Western state. I went up to Alaska multiple times. I mean, I've been all over pretty much every state, out west. So.
Gotcha. I was just curious. I had that one quick question.
Yeah.
But going back to kind of the NLP and the breakthrough experience, you mentioned acupuncture. What were some of the kind of things that that when you went to that first practitioner, what some of the kind of stuff that they did to help you with your breakthrough?
Yeah, so the acupuncture was like my first appointment was so cool because one, I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, they're gonna tell me I'm dying or something. That's like, that was the anxiety, right?
Yeah.
And when I get in there, it's like he just put a ton of needles in like my lower legs and stuff. And he was just like, he's like, okay, I'm just gonna let these needles sit for, probably an hour because you have so much stuff going on. So he left the room, and all of a sudden my body is just like quivering, just like this, like my legs and like my whole body is just quivering. And I was just like, I called him in for help. I was like, what is happening? He's like, oh, that's just like, you have so much energy that's like stuck in your body from what happened that like, it's moving around, and don't worry, it's going to go away. Don't worry about it. Just let it happen. And like my whole energy system was so out of whack that it basically had to recenter itself, and that was my first experience with acupuncture. And, really it came down to, so interesting is like I had a lot of liver like deficiencies, which comes down to anger, and that is something that I really released in my breakthrough session. So I had this huge blockage in my liver from this anger that I've had like my whole life until now, as well as like a kidney deficiency from like all the fear and stress and all that stuff from wildland firefighting. There's this like lower back pain. It's like, well, that's actually like there's kidney stuff going on from the fear. You have stuff going on there. We can talk a lot more about that, but there's like how these emotions affect our body. It really started to open my mind to this mind body connection that is, in the NLP world, it's more connected than I would say, modern science is willing to go like, we're going to go fringe science hardcore in the NLP world of like, the mind body connection is so strong. We can like the placebo effect, like, there's so much going on there with that stuff. So acupuncture is by far my favorite like energy modality because it was so powerful for me. And it's so interesting how, I asked my acupuncturist, like, I've known about acupuncture, but like, where did it come from? And really, it's so ancient. It's like 4,000 to 5,000 years old in China, and they don't really know how they found all these exact points and the meridians and all that stuff. I love it. So.
I could tell you're very passionate about that. And let's actually kind of dive deep into that. So you talked about stress and kind of like a building up in your lower back and your kidneys and things like that. Is there and I'm sure there probably is there a correlation between a certain type of stress or what you're kind of feeling and where you're having a particular ailment or discrepancy within the body? Like, is it all kind of mapped out? I'm kind of curious about that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the master of this is Louise Hayes, and she has like Hay House Production or Hay House Books. I'm sure people have heard of that company, but her process and her books is kind of what we follow in NLP. And I would say the biggest thing is like lower back pain is generally like finance worries. Like there's a financial thing going on. There's like, if we have a lot of throat things going on, like clogged throat or throat pain, there's like, you're not speaking up about something specifically. Let's see what else off the top of my head. Like, I think like if you're really stressed out or really have anxiety, there's that heat that builds up inside the body. So there's all these little elements that are like systems that get kind of out of whack from the emotions. And then they actually get stored inside the body. Like you ever had a knot in your muscle, how it's kind of like this big knot and you go to the massage therapist or you roll it out or something, and it like kind of dissipates. Well, these emotions get stuck like that and actually get stuck in the nervous system and create these blocks. And the acupuncture goes in there and releases that. Like it actually works with your nervous system with the electrical body. And the breakthrough session does, similar things. It's very similar. It's just we use words instead of needles.
Yeah. How did you first hear about, so I'm trying to figure out how this all works out in the timeline. 2014 and right around that time, you have that traumatic event with your captain. And again, I like to reiterate my condolences. I'm sorry. My best friend lives in Wyoming. If he, passed away all of a sudden, I don't know what I'd do. So when along that timeline did you go see this practitioner afterwards? Like, is this like, recently, or is this, where does it all kind of fit within the timeline here? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. So I would say like 2015 was the trauma. Within a year, with like about a year after that, went to my first acupuncture. Well, maybe it's like a year and a half, 2 years actually. So like 2017. And I would say a year of acupuncture really got me online. Like it took about a year or 6 months to really get settled down and moving forward. So it was about 2017 around there.
2017 around there. So you go to the practitioner. He helps you out with the acupuncture. You said it takes about a year or so for it to really start kind of taking an effect for you and really kind of settle down. What's your next step? What do you do after that? Where do you go from there?
Yeah, so really, I was still fighting fire, and I would say there's this another moment that I've had a lot of those in my life. But really, when was it? Maybe 2018 at some point. I think it was in the winter time, sometime maybe right after Christmas or something. But so I'm just like, I have this really bad flu, right? I'm like so sick. I have this huge fever and everything. So I go out to my living room to try and sleep because I'm just tossing and turning. And so I put on some meditation music and try and work with my mind body to kind of clear out this fever. And I'm just meditating, and I just heard this voice come over me like, "You're going to write a book." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, who the hell are you?" This is weird. Never had that experience. And it basically said like, this is God in a way of like, this is the source, like this is energy, like source energy. This is like whatever we want to call it, like universal consciousness is like, you're going to write a book. And so I sat up in this fever and I just got my journal out and just started writing like crazy and drawing pictures. And so that was kind of like, along with that, it was like, you're going to hire this coach, and you're going to hire this person that like, I wanted to reach out to, which was Matt Belair. He has a pretty big podcast.
Yeah.
And so me and Matt Belair started working together, and he really taught me some things and helped me get some habits in place to help me start writing that first book. And so next thing I know, I was going to coaching school to get my first coaching certification and going to NLP class. And it's kind of like, since 2018, I've just been building this business slowly. And until November is when I stopped firefighting. And now it's like, I'm doing this full time. The full time is pretty recent for me.
Wow. Very, very cool. Well, I'm super happy that you're able to do this full time. And I'm glad that this really been a help for you, and that you've been able to help other people. I'm curious, and again, I was going through your website, kind of doing my homework a little bit. I'm wondering, what is the Heart Fire method?
Yeah, so this came out with like my second book is called Awakened by Heart Fire, and it's this.
Very cool.
Yeah, in the first kind of part of the book, I explained this whole, like, in Chinese medicine, I had a heart fire ailment, whereas like we were talking about before, like my liver was too hot and my kidneys were too cold, and so I had this heat that was going into my heart, and this heart, like I had heart fire, so my heart was literally burning in
Wow.
Chinese medicine. And what kept happening was this fire would go into my head and start burning my brain. It was like I would feel like that. I had this low grade fever for 6 months.
Wow.
And so I had this fire inside my body, and through all of those spiritual lessons, I really learned that heart fire ailment was really a blessing for me. And it's such an opportunity to learn that obstacle that I had. And it taught me how to really dive deep into like learning to trust my gut, which is something I learned in firefighting so much. There'd be like, okay, we're going to do this line or we're not, like, and I would trust my gut, but this taught me how to really trust my heart and open my heart up to like, am I like doing the right thing in life? Like, where's my purpose lie? What am I like, am I connecting with, the highest good for all, like that really kind of deep spiritual heart activation. And this led me to, I would say, called integrative leadership is what I call it, but it's really learning to use the gut, heart, and your mind. So it's like this triple balance of leadership to really, checking your gut. Is it the right thing? Checking with your heart, like, yes, is the highest good for all, and checking like logically with your brain of like, is this logically makes sense? And what's so interesting about this, when I really started diving deep into this, we actually have more neurology inside of our gut than we do our heart. And we have more neurology in our heart than we do inside of our brain. So there is so much neurology outside of our brain, inside of our bodies, that I started to really like, okay, I was like, I'm going to go do another fire season. I'm going to go field test this. And so that's the heart fire method, is really learning how to make those decisions in life, find your purpose, and truly follow who you are at the deepest levels, like at a soul level, like finding your soul contract and following that. And that is, that's the heart fire process. And that's like, really break it down into steps in that book. And it is, something I coach people in as well, is after the breakthrough session, it's like, we're basically going to coach that heart fire method and teach you how to do that.
Very cool. I think that's a nice segue into kind of what I was going to ask next is, does your fire training, or did your fire training at all play a role in you with your breakthrough and understanding this new kind of healing process, and really kind of making a connection with your body and going through that? Did that help you or aid you in any way?
I would say not at all. It's totally opposite of like mechanical machismo. Like it's, getting like putting your nose to the grindstone and working. That's all that training teaches you. It's really,
Gotcha.
Poor training in that sense, I would say, actually.
I got you. I was just curious. Because I'm not familiar with a whole lot of fire training and things like that. But okay, so you've written a couple books. You mentioned that just a second ago. What was the process like going through and writing through your first book?
Oh my gosh, my first book, like we talked about the kind of that fever moment, and I just started writing. Like I was writing for like 2 hours a day, every single day, just writing like crazy. And I would say within like 2 or 3 months, I had this rough draft that was like, it was like I handed it to somebody and they were just like, this is word vomit. Like, I don't even know what you're writing about. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should read it. And so, when I really started looking through it, it was like, holy crap, there's like 3 books in here. And so it took a long time to kind of parse all of that out and actually make some books out of that. But I think it was like this integration process for me. The first draft was just like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, I got to write everything down and process this. And there was a couple of books that came out of that. My first one is Overcome Anxiety Like a Hero. And that's kind of the story that we're going through. And I would say that book was really hard because I learned, I've never like written anything before besides like, a document for the government,
Sure.
So really it was just like this really interesting process to teach myself how to write and then go through the editing process. And thankfully I found a really beautiful, awesome editor that takes my work that's kind of trash and turns into something that's really good. Right.
Very cool. Love that.
So awesome. Yeah. And going through the self-publishing process was definitely a learning experience, and there's a lot to it, but I really like being a self-published author because there's nobody else telling me like what my book needs to be or what it should be about. And there's a lot more work into it, but it's my work, nobody else's. So I love that.
Right. There's not any outside input that you have to worry about. Right. It's all coming from you, and there's something special about that. And I think, what was that moment like where it's all printed and it's released and you're holding that first copy in your hand?
Oh my gosh, that was one of the best moments in my life. Like, holy crap, I actually wrote a book. Like, that was huge. Like, it was one of those things of like, I put it out like on my vision board or my goals in like a year, and there it was. I had this book. I actually did it, and that was kind of like the first like, whoa, I can really do some stuff here. Like, this is huge.
Yeah, that's awesome. Our my co-host Jason, he just wrote a book and it released this past year. And I think he had a very similar moment when he held that first copy in his hand. He was just very, very proud moment for him, and it was a lot of work, but it was well worth it. So I'm sure if he was here, he'd be saying kind of the same thing. But man, so I'm curious. Before you said, do you do your own podcast, or you just hop on like guests, but do you have your own show?
Yeah, I do have my own show. It's
Very
called
cool.
Sacred Ancestry, and it's really I interview people, and it's, I would say, as open-minded as possible. So we do a lot of spirituality, a lot of like energy healers, a lot of mental health professionals. I interview wildland firefighters once in a while. And it started out just like, what, I love podcasting because I listen to podcasts like every day.
Same.
Yeah. Right. And so it's just like, what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for myself and just interview people I want to interview. And that's kind of how it started. And yeah, basically if I'm interested in what that person's saying, like, I'm going to interview them because it's just fun for me. And people like it now. It hit 1,000 downloads last month. So I'm really
That's
stoked
awesome.
about that.
Congratulations, man. That's fantastic. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the whole podcasting world.
Yeah.
I find it super fun. We had one yesterday, and of course we're lucky enough to have you today. And I love it, man. I just get on here. We meet all kinds of people, and we hear a bunch of different stories and perspectives. And I think that's important. I think we can all learn a little bit from each other. And I love that. So I really, really do, man. What is one thing like that you would say, like, if somebody's is going through some anxiety, someone's going through some troubled times, do you have any tips, any kind of tricks or strategies, like a go-to that you would do to kind of help process that?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is really look at your look at your diet. Like, what
Okay.
are you eating? Like, number one, go to your food, and number two would be to start looking at like a B complex vitamin. Like, start looking at B complex supplements. And obviously suggest acupuncture, but those would be like the first things. Like, go to a what is that book called? The Autoimmune Solution by Amy Myers. Like,
Okay.
read that book and do that exact thing of like an anti-inflammatory diet, because like 75% of the time, if it's not a trauma-based anxiety, like a PTSD kind of thing going on, it's probably more of a brain inflammation, which is, and as well as the B6 specifically is like, and vitamin D as well. Those, like, so there's some supplements, there might be some deficiencies going on, and a really strong nutritional diet is going to help a lot.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to me, like how it's all connected. You know what I mean? Mind, body, and soul. And you can't just ignore one side of it and expect to be healthy. So I think it's super fascinating and super interesting to me. Where'd you learn all this stuff, man? Like that's just like, did you get it all from the practitioner before? Is it a lot of self study or where'd you?
Yeah, I would say a lot of self-study. I also have been like I listen to Coast to Coast AM like every single night.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with them. So that's like George Norwich just taught me so much with all their guests and everything. But also when my anxiety specifically was like health anxiety. So I would just read books about like, oh my God, I'm dying. Okay, well, what do I do?
Sure.
And so I really dove deep in there. And then I've just been to so many acupuncture appointments that like I've picked up on a lot, and as well as all the training I've been through. I'm a fitness trainer and nutritionist, so I do have some basic anatomy and nutrition stuff as well. But I would say a lot of self study has really paid off. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Another quick question. Again, if I get too personal or if it's something you don't want to talk about, just tell me to hush up. I'll hush. But you said before that you had with this you went through kind of that experience, kind of like an out of body thing, and you had been on psychedelics before. That's never something I've done personally, but I'm curious, what is that experience like, and how did you know that when you were going through that experience, it was something, it just kind of felt it was different than like a psychedelic type thing?
Right. So let's see. Well, I think we should go back to like high school years,
Okay.
and personally, my parents went through this crazy divorce when I was like 9, 10 years old. Like it was pretty bad. Like there was jail time, there was psychiatric ward time for people. Like it was pretty messed up.
Yeah.
And so after that, I had this basically went straight to drugs. Like 11, 12 years old, I was like hardcore drug addict in high school.
Yeah.
Not really hard stuff, but I would say like, smoking weed and drinking, and then, pills. And then, it just kind of evolved to like nothing too crazy. So there was a couple of times in high school of like eating mushrooms. And I would say one specifically, me and some friends went to the desert in southeastern Oregon, and we ate mushrooms in a much more like intentional, kind of purposeful way. And it was, I would say, another moment in my life that was very spiritual, and it really opened up my eyes to different realities in a good way, and really opened my soul up to like this idea of past life or other realities that are past what we're just experiencing now. And that experience was so beautiful, and it was a little scary at times, but it was also so enlightening, I guess, in that moment. It was so powerful for me. And I guess really what happened was there was like, we were out in this desert, like this flat kind of, you can kind of imagine Bonneville Flats where you can like drive a vehicle, like going like 100 miles an hour, right, forever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of these salt flats, and these salt flats were like having these huge waves, like the ocean, like just these huge swells and like this seaweed. And it was like this really like ocean kind of cosmic experience. And I also had this experience of basically when we went back into our tent for the night, like I basically felt myself changing from, I changed into like a rock, and then I like got ground down by the weather and by like the geological time into like dirt. And then I grew into grass, and then like a deer ate me, and then like something ate the deer. So my soul kept passing from each like piece of earth into an animal, into the next animal, until finally I found my soul inside myself again. And that experience was very like Siddhartha by Herman Hesse. If anybody's ever read that book, that experience really, it was so beautiful to truly feel and understand that kind of everything has consciousness, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that sounds like quite the experience, man.
Yeah,
it really does. Well, that's super cool. But I got just kind of one more question and stuff before we kind of wrap up. I'm curious. Again, on your website, love it when the guests have a website. I think it's fantastic. You had a section about 6 minutes to peak performance. Can you tell us a little bit what that is?
Yeah, so in Wildland Fire, there's something that's really popular that's kind of from, I would say, the like NIFC or it's like NWCG. I'm not really sure who publishes it off the top of my head, but it's like 6 minutes for safety, right? So it's a bulletin that comes out every morning, and then we all do a training on it, and we all talk about it. And so I wanted to create something that was so normal, like it looks normal to the wildland firefighters, because there's safety is really normal. That's all we talk about. But the mental health stuff, it doesn't even compute for most wildland firefighters. It's like they don't even understand why they have anxiety or fear or what's going on, so to have something that's a little bit more normal. And so there's this 6 minutes for mindset, 6 minutes for peak performance, and 6 minutes for leadership is cool. And there's not a ton of them available yet. And I'm working on a new book right now that's just in the process. Wow. So that'll be coming soon, and a lot more of those. So yeah.
You're a busy man. You're a busy man. I don't know how you find time to write all these books and come up with these 6 minutes of everything, and at the same time be an amazing guest. But man, that's absolutely wild. But man, what do you got going on right now? Other than where can people find you? Before we kind of close up here, just like a minute for you to kind of plug anything and everything. What you got going on?
Yeah, so the main website is mountainmindtricks.com, and you can find everything you want to find out about me on there. And also Thomas and Wurm on Facebook. You can find me there, and Mountain Mind Tricks on Instagram, and Sacred Ancestry Podcast. Like, go check it out, because everything we've talked about today, like I go into it all really deep and tell a lot of stories. So it's great. And if somebody is struggling with like mental, emotional stuff going on, anxiety, depression, like those kinds of things, like please reach out, because the breakthrough session is huge, and it really does help. And it's alternative therapy. So if you've been through therapy before and it's not really helping, then this might help you.
Yeah, I think so too. And before we go, I think I want to touch on that a little bit, because we've had some friends going through some stuff like that recently before, and mental health it's no joke, man. I mean, we talk about it a lot. We try to. We think that it's not talked about enough out in the world, whether it's the podcast world or the book world or what have you in terms of media. But yeah, guys, seriously, if this can help you, if you think it can help you, I encourage you to go do it. Again, I'm not like a licensed guy by any means, but Thomas sounds like he knows what's going on. So hit him up, and hopefully that you can help. Man, before we go, have you? Do you have a specific story that's again, I'll keep asking you questions, but do you have a specific story that sticks with you recently when helping clients? Like, is there one that kind of sticks in your mind?
Let's see. The breakthroughs are so big. I would say, yeah, one specifically is there's a client I had that was having major angry outbursts, like somebody, there's like a parking situation, or there's something going on at work, and it's like he would just blow up. He would just get angry and lose complete control, and it was affecting his work, it was affecting his relationships and all that stuff. And after the breakthrough session, I don't want to go into too deep what it was, but what I'll say is that after the treatment, it was the anger is just gone. Like, getting like a little bit angry, like that's just not even possible for him anymore. Like, and after the breakthrough session, it's not like you can't get angry. It's just that you might get mad for like 30 minutes or 20 minutes. You're not going to have this anger that's pouring out for 2 weeks. Like, we all have had that, where we just hold on to that grudge and anger. And it's just like, no, that's just not even possible afterwards. So having him have such a difference in that anger is so amazing. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
That's awesome, man. I think we're gonna have you back on. I really do. Especially when my co-host Jason is feeling better. I'm sure he'd have tons of questions for you to do that. So maybe we can. I'll send you a message again via Facebook, and we'll talk. But we would love to have you back on again for sure, man. That's awesome.
Appreciate it. It. Yeah.
I want to say thank you to Evan, of course. Thank you for coming on, brother. Really do appreciate you. And thank you, as always, to our guest, Mr. Thomas Wurm. Thomas, thank you for coming on, man. I really enjoy listening to your stories, and man, some of the stuff that you were doing with firefighting, man, that takes a special kind of person to do. So seriously, like I said it before, but thank you. We really do appreciate you. But guys, I'm going to link all of Thomas's stuff, Mountain Mind Tricks, his books, all of that's going to be down in the description below. You can click down there if you want to go and find anything. Just a reminder, you can find us where all podcasts can be heard: Apple, Spotify, Google. We're all over the place. Also on YouTube, just search up Spiraling Podcast and you'll find us. We'll be the number one thing on the search bar there. But Thomas, thank you. Do you have any final words before we kind of go?
You know, whatever you think you are so much more than that, and all it takes is you exploring yourself.